When Shinji Naomi was summoned to another world, he found himself different from his classmates. He possessed no special powers and was forced to become a manager of an orphanage, a job nobody wanted due to its many complications. Shinji was taken to the Luna orphanage in a horse-drawn carriage. Despite being reincarnated from another world, it was said that his only powers were appraisal and defense, with no offensive capabilities. Therefore, to survive and stay in this world, he had no choice but to take on the responsibility of running the orphanage. Upon arrival, Shinji was quickly pushed off the carriage, which sped away as if the place was cursed. He entered the dilapidated building but couldn't deny its state of disrepair. He intended to clean up but was startled by the sound of painful crying. Investigating, he encountered a horrifying scene. A goblin was pulling a young girl's hair, intending to take her as a servant but was angered by Shinji's interruption. Shinji loudly demanded the goblin release the girl, inadvertently starting a life-or-death battle. The goblin charged at him, but surprisingly, Shinji dodged all its attacks, even though he had no offensive skills. The defeated monster fled, leaving Shinji and the girl alone. The girl continuously thanked Shinji, saying she would have died without his help. He was reluctant to accept her gratitude, but she insisted. As she fainted in his arms, Shinji suddenly discovered his healing abilities, which revived her. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she was satisfied with just a pat on the head from him. However, unbeknownst to Shinji, this act symbolized him taking her as his own according to the customs of her race. Unwillingly, Shinji became her master, a turn of events he was utterly unprepared for. Shinji was then baffled by his newfound powers. Why was this happening to him? The girl, undressing, offered to take orders from him, which shocked Shinji. He explained that he was only there to run an orphanage, so she should get dressed. The girl, named Lucia, was thrilled to help him and promised to become his wife when she grew up, surprising Shinji again. He tried to calm her down, but it seemed she misunderstood, and her happiness doubled. Shinji accepted her as the first orphan, but for now, he could only provide food. He reflected on his past, where his mother left and his father raised him in a violent environment. Yet now, Shinji had to take up this task. Clearly the king was not discerning in choosing people. The first thing was that he couldn't let Lucia starve, so he began cooking. As he started to clean up the place, he found that Lucia had already done everything. She had cleared the large pile of rubbish and cleaned the second floor, leaving not a speck of dust. Even the grass in front of the house was trimmed by Lucia, leaving not a single blade. This worried Shinji because her work here was not supposed to be like this. Lucia felt very happy that she could help her master with many tasks and proved she was not useless. Shinji said he wanted her to play like other children, but it seemed his words didn't get through to her. Eventually, he thought of rewarding her with rest, but she didn't want that. Just being with him in the same house was the greatest reward for her. But then she expressed a wish to Shinji, something trivial. She just wanted him to pat her head like before. Seeing her bright smile made Shinji feel happy too. Lucia, tired, decided to sleep on Shinji's lap for a comfortable nap. Before falling asleep, she didn't forget to say, "I love you," leaving Shinji stiffened in surprise. He loudly protested that this was not a place to sleep, but Lucia really didn't care about such things. Seeing her lying peacefully in his arms gave him an unusual sense of tranquility. Finally, after everything, he really had to become the head of an orphanage. The future might be difficult, but he promised himself not to let the children suffer the hunger and illness he experienced in his past. After some time, both of them fell into a gentle sleep next to each other. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, everyone was completing their skill assessments. One by one, they placed their hands on a glowing sphere above, unaware of the crisis Waltham Kingdom was facing. When it was Shinji's turn, his results surprised the reader. He belonged to the magic of summoning heroes from other worlds. But if someone was summoned by this magic, they would possess immense power. Yet, Shinji only had protection and basic appraisal magic. The king heard this and remarked that being good at protection could hardly be considered a strength. Everyone mocked Shinji, wondering why he was chosen at all. But it was to be expected, as everyone here, except him, possessed high-level skills. They would all become an arch-wizard or a paladin. The king had planned to enlist everyone in the army, but it seemed this plan would change. The king, having no place in the palace where Shinji could be effectively utilized, decided to assign him to manage the Luna orphanage. If Shinji could raise more than 10 children there, the king would consider sending him back to his own world. Shinji awoke to realize that all that had just happened was a dream, a recollection. The king had given him some money, so he decided to use it to buy some household items that morning. Lucia also woke up and learned of his plans for the day. Although Shinji intended for her to stay at home, she insisted on accompanying him, and he couldn't refuse. The two went to the market, which was crowded and still unfamiliar to Shinji. Lucia caught the attention of some burly men sitting in the distance. Shinji made purchases but kept holding Lucia's hand, fearing she might get lost. After shopping, they were drawn into a brawl involving some adventurers, and Shinji decided to leave. He didn't want to invite trouble, but unexpectedly, he encountered a bigger problem. A tall, bald man approached them, wanting to take Lucia out to eat with him. This man was persistent, but Lucia naively thought he was inviting her master too, making Shinji seem very popular. It took Shinji's explanation for her to realize the situation and hide behind him in shock. Hearing her call Shinji master infuriated the bald man, who couldn't get what he wanted. He taunted Shinji, asking why he didn't put her to work in a singing house, which Shinji found offensive. When the man angrily turned to attack Shinji but was caught and his arm twisted behind his back. Despite his struggle, he couldn't break free, growing increasingly angry. Shinji himself didn't understand his own strength. All he knew was the man's attack seemed slow, and he had extraordinary power to restrain him. Only after making the man apologize to Lucia did Shinji let him go. But the man wouldn't let Shinji off so easily after being humiliated publicly. He swore to get his revenge on Shinji, with interest. Meanwhile, the brawl among the adventurers continued, showing no signs of stopping, and one of them even drew a sword to fight dirty. Unexpectedly, as Shinji and Lucia walked by, a sword was flung their way. Without thinking, Shinji reflexively raised his hand to block the sword, surprisingly breaking it in half. Indeed, the fact that Shinji broke an orichalcum sword in half with just one hand caused a stir among the people. The curious eyes of the people still glued to Shinji and Lucia made him feel uneasy. He led her through the forest back to the orphanage, muttering his frustration along the way. Lucia looked up to him in admiration for protecting her from the recent events. Shinji denied that he was only protecting himself, but Lucia was still moved. Lucia felt that today's shopping trip and the protection Shinji provided felt like a date. Shinji couldn't accept this and didn't want her to misunderstand, but seeing her happy, he hesitated to correct her. He tried to explain it wasn't a date, but she just smiled, so he gave up. They quickly returned home to prepare for the evening meal. After getting back, they immediately started their individual tasks. Shinji cleaned outside, but always felt like someone was watching him from a distance. Since it was just watching and not acting, he didn't know how to handle it and eventually gave up and went inside. There, he began making soap with the scented oil and baking soda he had bought at the market. Lucia approached, curious about what he was doing, and insisted on helping. Reluctantly agreeing, they started making soap together. Shinji was surprised that she didn't know what soap was, reflecting on the backwardness of this world. He told her it was like magical cleanliness and carefully taught her the steps to make soap. He assured her that using soap was a good thing. First, they boiled water, and when it was hot, added baking soda. When bubbles formed and started to decrease, they slowly added the oil and stirred the mixture evenly. Eager to help, Lucia stirred for 30 minutes, surprised at how easy it was, similar to cooking. Once the mixture thickened, they poured it into molds and waited for it to harden. Lucia watched the molds intently, undeterred by Shinji's warning that it would take time. Finally, when it hardened, Shinji cut a piece for Lucia to try, but she didn't know how to use it. She smelled and touched it but couldn't figure out how to wash her hands. He had to help her wet her hands and rub the soap on them. Lucia enjoyed the soft bubbles it created, but accidentally splashed water everywhere, wetting her clothes until they became translucent. Embarrassed, Shinji turned away and told her to quickly change her clothes. Afterwards, they rested, and Shinji told her they had something to do at 3 p.m. She was happy he wasn't mad at her but worried about what he had planned for the afternoon. After changing her clothes, Lucia quickly ran down to find out what would happen next. In the kitchen, Shinji was using baking soda to make pancakes. Seeing her surprise, he understood that people here weren't fully aware of the uses of this powder. To Lucia, it was just a cleaning agent from her memories of being a slave, or as a rising agent. She was worried if it was edible, but Shinji reassured her. First, they separated egg yolks and whites, then mixed the prepared ingredients into the yolks. After creating a thick mixture, they added the egg whites last. Lucia was in charge of stirring, amazed to find it turning into whipped cream. Shinji explained that it was similar, but today they were making something different. Finally, the pancakes were ready, fragrant and hot. Lucia asked timidly, and Shinji replied that this was his orphanage, so he sets the rules. He explained that she would be fed 3 main meals and 1 snack at 3 p.m. every day. To Lucia, this was like a dream, as she had never been treated so well. Watching Shinji cook for her, Lucia couldn't stop praising him, making him bashful. She feared that if she accepted such treatment, she might be punished by the gods. Seeing her worry, Shinji comforted her, saying that the best thing she could do now was to be obedient and listen to him. He served the pancakes with a special layer of honey on top. Lucia hesitated to eat, but Shinji threatened to throw them away, so she quickly took a bite. She used the most eloquent words to describe the pancakes, making him very satisfied. However, he coolly announced that tomorrow's snack would be the same. Lucia couldn't believe her ears, overjoyed at such happiness. Shinji found her smile troublesome yet wanted to protect it forever. Honestly, she was the first person in this world to praise his cooking and make him this happy. This morning, Shinji was thinking hard about how to make money as the king's funds were running low. Lucia was eager to be part of this joy, attentively watching everything he did and curious to help. Shinji reluctantly nodded, agreeing to let Lucia help as long as she didn't get in the way. He thought that if he didn't let her help, she might feel like a burden, especially after eating so many pancakes and causing a financial strain. The first task they wanted to tackle was creating a picture book, a type of book filled with drawings to help people understand. Lucia praised Shinji's drawing skills, but he modestly claimed they were just rough sketches. Lucia, having once served wealthy masters, had never seen anything so intriguing before. Suddenly, 2 menacing-looking men with weapons arrived. It turned out they were Gran, the leader of the Heroes Guild, and his A-rank hero escort. Gran, without any preamble, invited Shinji to join their guild, surprising him. It appeared they had seen Shinji splitting an orichalcum sword with his bare hands. Shinji knew that his actions that day had been too conspicuous and beyond his control. He flatly refused the offer, as he already had too many responsibilities here. Lucia, standing behind him, tugged at his shirt but didn't dare speak, only looking at him with pitiful eyes. Shinji understood her feelings, reminiscent of his own past when his mother left and he was afraid to speak up. Seeing her now, without anyone to rely on, he couldn't join the guild. Gran promised Shinji great benefits as an S-rank adventurer, but Shinji remained unmoved. This refusal angered Gran's escort, Guzuzu, who shouted why Shinji dared to reject Gran's invitation. Guzuzu, dismissing everything as mere rumors, then swung his sword at Shinji. Even though Gran tried to stop Guzuzu, it was too late, and the sword shattered upon a light touch from Shinji. Guzuzu, unable to contain his anger, decided to continue the fight but was immediately slapped by Gran. Watching Gran kneel to apologize and plead with him, Shinji awkwardly helped him stand. He realized there must be a deeper reason behind all this and decided to investigate further. It turned out all these events were due to tensions between the kingdom and its neighbor. Understanding the complexity of the situation, Shinji quickly refused without further thought. Before leaving, Gran handed Shinji a bag of money as compensation for Guzuzu's foolish actions. As Shinji was about to close the door, a strange goblin spoke to him. She claimed to have seen all of his power and wanted to use him for her own plans. It turned out that the girl who had been secretly observing Shinji for the past few days was an ELF wearing bizarre red underwear. Shinji had already guessed this, so he wasn't surprised and continued to listen to her story. She claimed to be the former ELF queen of this forest, but Shinji was skeptical. According to her, the ELF tribe was under threat of invasion by the Balk Kingdom. She explained that a year ago, Balk had destroyed her tribe, and now she was determined to seek vengeance. Seeing Shinji's refusal, she decided to request to stay, arguing that the place was meant for orphans. Since she had lost both her parents, she fit the definition of an orphan. Anticipating his outright rejection, she resorted to seduction to change his mind. When she undressed in front of the orphanage, Shinji quickly pulled her inside and threw some clothes at her. He had thought she was trying to be enticing, but realized she was just wondering why the children there always wanted to undress. He had no interest in immature kids, so her actions were pointless. He told her to leave once she was dressed, but then Lucia intervened, urging her to stay. Lucia empathized with her, having been abandoned by her own parents. Despite Shinji's threats, the ELF wouldn't change her decision, so Shinji had no choice but to let her stay. However, he made her promise to stay for 3 years without seeking revenge. She would have 3 meals a day plus a snack at 3 p.m. and must go to bed early. She wasn't allowed to come back late for meals or stay up too late. Beyond that, she could do as she pleased. The ELF listened to these reminders and immediately thought of her late father, shedding a tear of regret. Knowing she had always been a tomboy, she had often upset her father. Now, it was too late for regrets, so she stayed silent. Lucia, happily, led her to her room, leaving Shinji standing there. He didn't have much time to worry about the ELF's personal issues. What mattered now was how to quickly prepare enough food for 3 people. Shinji had found a good variety of potatoes a few days earlier in the mountains and now wanted to start farming and raising livestock. He also harvested many unusual sprouts, hoping to propagate them from here. The 2 girls, Lucia and Erin, curiously watched, finding this activity quite new and interesting. Lucia, of course, couldn't stand still and decided to help Shinji at all costs. Erin, standing by, heard that they wanted to clear the weeds and could help with her powers, just waiting for Shinji to ask. However, Shinji didn't say anything and ignored her, which made Erin very angry. She pouted and turned away, no longer paying attention to them. Shinji thought he could clear the weeds and prepare the land in 1 morning, but it seemed impossible. The land had been neglected for so long and was overrun with weeds. Seeing the 2 struggling, Erin finally stepped in to help. She proudly claimed she was just experimenting with her magic, nothing special. But her experiment ended up helping a lot, even though Shinji told her to practice elsewhere, making her angry again. Yet, with the efforts of all 3, the garden was finally set up quickly. At the dinner table, they discussed how to cultivate and care for the garden. Lucia volunteered to water the plants daily, but Erin scolded her, calling her foolish. She explained that watering the plants every day could lead to waterlogging. Shinji thought to himself that Erin seemed quite knowledgeable. He then stood up to cook dinner with the potatoes he had harvested that morning. Erin, seemingly eager to learn from Shinji, followed him into the kitchen. Shinji was cautious, thinking she wanted to learn his money-making methods to eventually take over his assets and fund her revenge plans. She asked about the ingredients, but he refused to answer. Eventually, she got bored and left. Shinji didn't care until Lucia gently reminded him that Erin had left. Realizing her feelings, Shinji hurried after Erin to keep her because he understood what she was feeling. He had also felt neglected by his parents in the past. Children tend to not want to return to a home where their opinions are not respected. He looked for her, wanting to provide her with proper meals, as he had promised to cook for her. But as he reached the door, he was surprised to find 2 people, a man and a woman, waiting for him. It turned out they were related to Erin, and now she was in actual danger. After running out of the orphanage, Erin was brutally abducted by a man and a woman. Shinji shouted, asking where Erin was, but they threatened him, saying Erin would be in danger if he didn't comply. They even threatened to demolish the orphanage into dust. The man, with a single swing of his hammer, created a large hole in the wall, proudly looking at the woman standing there. It turned out he was trying to show off his strength foolishly to impress her. Shinji's anger peaked as he saw the woman smiling. Then, without warning, a barrage of flying dishes and utensils struck the man, knocking him to the ground. Humiliated and unable to stand up, he was furious. Shinji, with a dismissive gesture, ordered the woman to drag the man away. She refused, revealing herself as the top courtesan of the kingdom, desired even by the king. Men would give anything for her smile, using her beauty and charm to attract others. But for Shinji, these were mere trifles. He sarcastically remarked that the brothel she came from must be the kingdom's most wretched place. Insulted, she tried to attack him, but then Lucia peeked out, curious about the clattering noises. Realizing why Shinji was not interested in her, the woman fell silent. Suddenly, a swarm of bees, summoned by Shinji, attacked the woman, forcing her and the man to flee hastily while apologizing profusely. Watching them leave, Shinji knew he had another mess to clean up. Lucia, worried about Eren, urged Shinji to find her. He knew Eren had been hidden by the henchmen of the duo but had an idea of where she might be. He told Lucia to stay put and quickly left to ensure Eren's safety. As he went, Shinji couldn't stop thinking about the new abilities emerging within him. The power to heal Lucia, defeat the man, and predict Eren's location surprised him. This could be a good sign, indicating he could protect himself and those around him. Eren was captured and taken to a dark dungeon, stripped of her clothing and tightly bound. Her knife was also taken by her captors, but she was determined to return. If her abductors were human traffickers, she feared she might never see the orphanage again. She remembered her arguments with Shinji and the times Lucia taught her things. She realized that she had grown fond of the place and wanted to stay with them. She planned her escape. When someone opened the door, she would kick them and use the knife to cut her bonds and flee. Hearing footsteps, she prepared herself. But the person she kicked turned out to be Shinji. Pretending to be annoyed, he initially walked away, but soon returned, smiling kindly and explaining he was just joking. After freeing Eren, they prepared to return to the orphanage. Suddenly, Eren asked Shinji if he would miss her if she never came back. Understanding her feelings, Shinji gently explained that a family always shares a bond. If she left, he and Lucia would always remember her and imagine her presence at the dinner table. He knew the importance of family meals in an unhappy home. Eren, overwhelmed with joy at his response, felt she finally had a place and people to return to. When they returned to the orphanage, Eren was unable to walk, so Shinji carried her princess style, making her heart race. They quickly got back, not wanting Lucia to worry too much. Lucia, who had been anxiously waiting at the window, was relieved to see them safe. Shinji asked Lucia to take care of Eren's wounds while he cleaned up the mess from the earlier confrontation. Then Lucia approached Eren with a suspicious look on her face, making Eren realize that staying at the orphanage might be scarier than being with her kidnappers. This morning, the three of them decided to set up a stall on the street to sell fried potato pancakes and earn some money. The preparation was a bit cumbersome, and Eren was still sulking and initially didn't want to participate, leading to an awkward start. However, thanks to Lucia's coaxing, Eren eventually agreed to help, and they managed to open their stall for business. They were surprised to find an extra plate of pancakes set aside for tasting, allowing customers to try before buying. Despite the deliciousness of the pancakes, passers-by were initially unaware of what they were selling. Standing idly by, they feared they wouldn't sell anything by evening. The business started off slow, with people showing little interest in their stall. Even though Shinji had put up an eye-catching sign, people were skeptical of the unfamiliar food, fearing it might be poisonous. Shinji even wrote on the sign that it was a foreign delicacy, available only one portion per person, hinting at a special opening day promotion. This was a psychological tactic Shinji brought from his world, but still, there were no customers despite Eren's dedicated advertising efforts. The air was filled with dismissive murmurs, adding to their dejection. Realizing that mere sight might not attract customers as the pancakes didn't look very appealing, Lucia decided to take the tasting plate and offer samples to everyone. Many refused to try the odd-looking food, but eventually, her pleading eyes convinced a man to taste a piece. Initially underwhelmed, he soon found himself enjoying the pancakes and quickly came to buy a portion. His interest sparked curiosity in others, leading to a rush of customers. Soon, the 30 pancakes on the table were all sold out. They had earned a total of 1,500 coins for the day, bringing joy to everyone. Finally, Shinji had found a stable source of income for the orphanage. Both girls playfully argued over who deserved more credit, chatting excitedly on their way home. Since many people had missed out on buying the pancakes today, Shinji decided to return and sell more the next day. He was now able to fulfill his promise of providing 3 meals a day for the 2 girls, bringing peace of mind and relief to him as the head of the orphanage. That night, Shinji couldn't sleep as he was preoccupied with thoughts of securing the market before other traders could imitate his product. Knowing he couldn't just sell potato pancakes, he decided to come up with another item to attract attention. As he was about to go to bed, the 2 girls came in with pillows, asking to sleep with him. He couldn't really say no, so he just covered himself with a blanket and told them to go to sleep quickly. They could chat, but since he was in the middle, it was better for everyone to get some rest for the next day's work. However, Shinji's dreams were haunted by his past. The arguments of his parents over him being his mother's illegitimate child were deeply ingrained in his memory. His father's abuse after his mother left had become a nightly torment. Waking up in a sweat, he saw Lucia next to him, also calling out for her parents in her sleep, as she too had been abandoned at a young age. Seeing Shinji beside her gave her some comfort as she drifted back into her restless sleep. Then Erin, in her sleep, mumbled about needing a knife because someone was trying to kidnap her after her family had been taken away. Only when Shinji embraced her did she stabilize and continue her tearful sleep. Watching the 2 girls, Shinji felt a pang in his heart, realizing that they had already come halfway in building the orphanage. He knew they would grow up to be beautiful, but few knew of the nightly struggles and the lack of deep sleep they endured. The next morning, they started their gardening work as the plants began to grow. They needed to water the plants as they showed signs of drying out, so they went to fetch water from an old well that still had some water left. Before drawing water, they threw a stone into the well as a ritual for good luck. To their surprise, there was a cry of pain from the well. Frightened, the girls clung to each other, fearing a ghost was emerging when a hand appeared on the edge of the well. But, to their astonishment, a gorgeous, scantily dressed woman appeared. She lightly scolded Shinji for daring to throw a stone at her, calling it rude. That evening, the 2 girls were still in shock after witnessing the unexpected scene. However, Shinji seemed unafraid and even approached to talk to the apparition. It turned out to be a water spirit named Sama, revered among the countless water spirits in the area, also known as Shii Wani-chan. She had been sealed in the well for over 1,000 years and was grateful to Shinji for breaking the curse that trapped her. Admiring and infatuated with him, she boldly expressed her desire to marry him. Shinji, however, bluntly refused, as he had no interest in her. Even her offers of turning him into a spirit like her or granting him immortality didn't sway him. As a last resort, she promised to refill the well with water to catch his attention. Shinji agreed but warned her that she must leave immediately if she failed. Sama, thinking Shinji hated her, created a dark rain cloud overhead in distress. But Shinji clarified that he didn't hate her, her persistent advances were just bothersome. Hearing this, Sama was somewhat consoled but again brought up marriage. The 2 girls, unable to bear it anymore, dragged her away, leaving a puzzled Shinji behind. Erin stayed back, teasing Shinji about touching the other girl's chest. She defiantly proclaimed that in a few years, she would be just as desirable, warning him not to have any weird thoughts. Meanwhile, Lucia pulled the water spirit aside, stating she could only be a 3rd wife. The spirit, heartbroken but still determined, accepted her position as a concubine to Shinji. Upon their return, Shinji was indifferent to their conversation. His priority was a well full of water for his farming needs. With a mere wave of her hand, Sama filled the well with clear water, delighting everyone. This solved their water problem and promised healthier growth for the garden plants. However, it also meant Shinji now had a significant new trouble to deal with. Though Sama claimed to be 1,000 years old, she didn't seem much older than Lucia. Shinji's biggest curiosity now was how he managed to break her seal. The powers within him and their origins were mysteries he needed to unravel himself. Being able to smell distinct scents, Eren quickly went in search of curare leaves. She detected a strong scent nearby and returned with a pile of leaves, only to find out they were actually gift leaves, which are highly poisonous and could be lethal if consumed. The group decided they would need to bring all the leaves back to Lucia for identification. However, distinguishing between curare and gift leaves based on scent alone proved challenging, as gift leaves had a slightly stronger odor. Shinji then taught them how to differentiate the leaves by the shape of their stems, curare stems being round and gift stems being crescent-shaped. This revelation was a relief to everyone, making it easier to identify the two plants. With everyone's help, they collected a large quantity of curare leaves. Next, they needed to extract a magical solution from Onii-chan's horn. Everyone was amazed to see the miraculous water for the first time. It was then time to prepare the mid-level potion. First, they crushed the curare leaves to extract a gel, which was then mixed with the prepared magical solution. The most challenging part was monitoring the concoction, as careful observation was crucial in potion making. Lucia completed her batch of medicine first and presented it for assessment. The potion turned out to be safe and effective, so they decided to continue making more. Eri then took her turn, using most of the available ingredients, but unfortunately, her potion turned out to be toxic and bitter, so it had to be discarded. Finally, it was Onii-chan's turn to try making the potion. She worked diligently, though her constant talking frustrated the usually quiet Shinji. Suddenly, she screamed for everyone to run as the potion was about to explode. Luckily, Shinji's protective abilities allowed him to pull everyone to safety. This adventure in potion-making turned out to be both challenging and headache-inducing for the whole group. The task of making medicine had indeed left all 4 members with a throbbing headache, unable to figure out a solution. No wonder this potion was so hard to find. Its creation was extremely complex and not everyone could make it. The 3 girls were in tears, fearing their failure meant the orphanage could be repossessed. They were anxious about where they would go if they lost their home, which was a major concern. Feeling the pressure, Shinji decided to give it a try. He couldn't believe that the potion was that difficult to make, but Lucia worried he might not be able to control his power. However, with the support of the 3 girls by his side, Shinji felt more confident. After focusing and following the steps they had learned, he finally succeeded. He produced a batch of the mid-level potion, much to the excitement of the 3 girls. Thanks to Shinji, the orphanage's safety was assured. Shinji then taught the girls the key to potion making, paying attention to the freshness of the leaves. He explained that the potion was similar to making vegetable soup. Eri's mistake was adding too much magical solution, turning the potion into a mushy mess. She needed to observe carefully instead of seasoning everything like cooking. The new method was a revelation, as all Eri had learned was from ancient books, which according to Shinji, might be incorrect. Publishing this discovery could cause a significant debate, and Shinji wanted to avoid further complications. Quickly, he prepared 4 more bottles to meet the required amount and happily headed back. However, they were suddenly discovered by Gale goblins, notorious forest assassins and the strongest of the surviving goblin species. The goblins, having found them and the high-grade potion, demanded Shinji hand over the medicine, promising him a quick death. The potion was more valuable than Shinji's life, so why should he comply? The 4 formed a circle to protect the potion, not allowing anyone to touch it. The goblins' mention of taking the potion to their king made Shinji think hard. There was definitely something more to this, and he wondered why these creatures were working for a king. That evening, after finishing their work, everyone decided to take a bath together to prepare for a good night's sleep. Shinji initially intended to bathe alone for convenience, but Lucia approached him, suggesting they bathe together to scrub each other's backs. Despite his refusal, she insisted, claiming that as Oniai-chan, he could create a hot spring, making the bath more enjoyable. When Shinji mentioned he could use cold water, Lucia countered with several arguments, including the inability of the three girls to scrub their backs without him. She argued that running around as he suggested could cool the water down too quickly, risking a cold, which no one wanted. The three girls quickly changed into their bathing clothes, ready to join him. Resigned, Shinji allowed the three to lead him to the bathhouse. Their excitement was palpable as they all soaked in the hot water together. Shinji, half-jokingly, claimed it was their idea to bathe with him, only to be scolded. This was followed by a session of scrubbing each other's backs. Shinji took on the task of scrubbing Erin's back, but the other two girls soon wanted his help too. Reluctantly, he used all the techniques he had learned in his old world to help them. The girls were extremely happy and joyful as they played with soap and bubbles, creating a cheerful scene. Suddenly, Shinji challenged the water spirit to create a waterfall, curious to see if she could do it. Surprisingly, not only could she create a waterfall but also a rain shower, making the task seem trivial. Shinji then demanded a cold waterfall and pushed Oniai-chan under it, calling it a soul-cleansing ritual from his old world. Trustingly, she stepped under it but didn't forget to pull Shinji in with her, knowing his plan all along. Shinji just wanted to tease her, but she wasn't going to let him have the last laugh. Stuck in the cold waterfall, Shinji couldn't help but curse loudly. The two girls outside the waterfall laughed heartily at the scene, enjoying the moment thoroughly. Unknown events transpired, leading Oniai-chan to loudly declare her sole wish to marry Shinji. It was her greatest desire after awakening from 1,000 years of slumber. However, Shinji found the situation too troublesome and flatly refused, hurting her pride. Upset, she decided to create chaos. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, drawing the attention of all four members. An elderly, short man entered, accompanied by a scarred-faced individual. Despite the old man's frail appearance, Shinji felt he was more of a threat than the imposing figure behind him. The old man, named Kinbergs Titano, the head of the Kinbergs family, had come to discuss a matter with Shinji. His companion was Teo, the second son of the family. Kinbergs revealed that his visit was about a feud between his family and Shinji, likely involving the duo Abduck and Tors, and he seemed to be seeking retribution. Surprisingly, Kinbergs didn't come for vengeance but to reclaim the orphanage, which was still legally owned by the previous owner. Seeing Lucia's distress over losing the orphanage, Shinji felt even more troubled. He wondered how he could prevent losing the orphanage while also settling an old debt of 10 million. The only solution was for Shinji, an S-rank adventurer, to find a rare elixir for Kinbergs, 5 bottles of a mid-level potion. If Shinji could deliver them on time, Kinbergs would consider his proposal. Shinji was surprised that Kinbergs knew he was an S-rank adventurer and that the mid-level potions were rarely sold in city markets. Kinberg's son and grandson were gravely ill and needed the potions continuously. Moved by their hopeful plea, Shinji agreed to help. He had never experienced such family concern before. He ventured into the forest to find the medicine, accompanied by the girls who insisted on helping. Lucia's ability to identify plants by sound made the task seem easier. Together, all four were determined to save the orphanage at all costs. Erin educated everyone that medicine is a pharmaceutical product designed to treat illnesses and save lives. For their task, they would need curare leaves and a magical solution to make the medicine. The goblin encounter posed a formidable challenge for Shinji and his companions, known for their teamwork and combative skills. With the situation escalating, Shinji decided to engage in a fierce battle alongside the three girls. The first goblin to attack was left with only one arm, causing shock and fear among its comrades. The leader, unable to accept this outcome, launched an attack but was quickly defeated by Shinji. When the goblins turned their aggression towards Lucia, Shinji anticipated their move and effortlessly intervened. Seizing the goblins' knives, he launched them at several attackers, effectively taking them down. The remaining two, terrified, tried to flee to report to their king, but Shinji wouldn't let them escape. His skillful use of the knives took down the last of the assailants. After the conflict, the group headed back to the orphanage. Lucia joyfully thanked Shinji for protecting them, but for Shinji, it was merely his duty to safeguard the orphan children. Oniai-chan also admired Shinji's prowess, considering him a hero regardless of his actions. They returned to the city but found it unusually deserted, a stark contrast to its typically bustling atmosphere. Puzzled, Lucia wondered what could have caused the sudden absence of people. As they ventured into an alley, Shinji recognized a few familiar faces. Deciding not to waste more time searching, they headed back to the orphanage. There, they were greeted by the old man, Kinbergs, who had a troubled expression and seemed eager to communicate something important. It turned out that the king had issued a decree to repossess the orphanage, leaving them with no room to contest. Despite Kinberg's desire to give Shinji the potion and preserve the orphanage, the king's order left him no choice but to relay the unfortunate news. Shinji was left to ponder why the king would take such action. He wondered if the king had discovered or learned something about him, raising questions and concerns about their future and the fate of the orphanage. The broken promise left Shinji furious, feeling the huge national debt and the orphanage's fate were unfairly intertwined. He was also worried about the country's tense relations with its neighboring nation. The girls, unable to accept the reality, cried out in protest, not wanting to leave their home and Shinji. Gran, the head of the Adventurers Guild, urgently sought Shinji's help for a matter concerning national security. He informed Shinji of an imminent goblin invasion, causing further concern among the girls who feared for Shinji's safety. The Goblin King planned to lead his army into their land the next day, leaving everyone uncertain about the outcome. Lucia, having witnessed the goblins' brutality, was terrified. With the city's residents evacuated to safety, a mysterious woman arrived to explain the situation. She spoke of a goblin uprising, a scenario thought to be only a legend. Miyamoto, a warrior with a prized sword, stood up to fight for justice and peace in the country. Shinji, now seen as the Adventurers Guild's only hope due to his S-rank strength, was expected to save the nation. While others would defend the city from within, Shinji was to confront the threat outside. Understanding the gravity of the situation, he helped Gran stand up and respectfully declined the request to fight, prioritizing the safety of the new students. Gran, desperate for Shinji's help, offered a substantial reward of 10 million. Shinji agreed, but on one condition: the order to repossess the orphanage must be revoked, and the entire reward sum must be paid. He planned to use the money to settle the debt with the Kinbergs family and save the orphanage. This proposal was quickly accepted by both Gran and the elder, as it was beneficial for both parties. But this could only happen once, as Shinji had no way yet to fully protect the orphanage. After receiving his guests, he quickly returned to the orphanage to prepare for the guild's carriage arriving to take him away. Lucia, having overheard everything, stood at the door, wanting to help Shinji with a large spoon and a big pan as her armor. Eri and Oniai-chan were not indifferent either, both brimming with determination. This place was their family, and they were prepared to protect it at all costs, not always relying on Shinji. Looking at this scene, Shinji felt a warmth in his heart hearing the word family. They began strategizing for a smart battle, primarily taking place on the Nalia Plains. If they were to disembark from the horse carriage immediately upon arrival, they could gain a time advantage before the battle began. This would be a good strategy for both the army and adventurers to gather information. They decided not to go directly there but to camp north of the plains. Eren was confused, but Shinji explained that he just needed to eliminate the Goblin King. The girls started preparing for cooking, with Lucia even bringing soup to cook. Shinji had to remind everyone that this was not a picnic, so they shouldn't make a large fire to avoid revealing their position with smoke. He decided to use the army as bait while he took a strategic advantage. Seeing that the girls didn't fully understand, he calmly explained in detail. The plan was for the army to engage with the goblins, and during this, he would directly attack the leader. He needed all three girls, so they should eat quickly and get some sleep for the next day's efforts. Waking up at night, Shinji was very worried about how things would unfold the next day. Looking around, everyone else seemed to be sleeping soundly, seemingly unbothered. Suddenly, he noticed Lucia was missing. He found her sitting on a rock, quietly gazing at the moon, lost in thought. Joining her, he asked what she was thinking about. She shared her initial fears about him and how she thought Shinji was cold and unfeeling. But over time, she realized they were a burden to him, yet he always cared for them patiently. Although Shinji never admitted it, she was grateful and really liked being near him. That night, she was reminiscing about her hometown, a small town called Karen, located in the north of the kingdom of Warzum, with a view similar to where she sat. She almost cried, remembering the time her parents took her to see such a view, but now she was fortunate to have Shinji by her side. Lucia repeatedly thanked Shinji, subtly hinting she wanted him to take her body, but she didn't dare say it outright. Misunderstanding her, Shinji thought she was inviting him to her hometown and immediately accepted. As someone who enjoyed traveling, he was only concerned about the cost. Shinji's naive thoughts made Lucia pause momentarily, but it was fine. As long as he was willing, she would take him to meet her parents in the Golden Stream, sure they would be delighted to know their daughter was well cared for. That night, they admired the moon together, enjoying the peace before the battle the next day. Early the next morning, the four hid behind a rock, watching a formidable goblin army preparing for battle below. It was a significant goblin migration, and the three girls looked quite anxious. The guards at the city gates seemed weak and vulnerable. Suddenly, the goblins halted their movement. Clearly, their leader was somewhere nearby, commanding them. Shinji planned to use the king's soldiers as bait, waiting for the right moment to act. His arrival at the Luna orphanage was fate, guiding him to save it. Determined, he would use everything at his disposal to protect it. The trustful, sparkling eyes of the girls empowered him not to fail. The tasks he had for the three girls were perfectly planned, keeping them within his sight for observation. The girls, having rehearsed the plan hundreds of times, knew exactly what to do. When the orphanage's army was ready, the battle officially began. Shinji explained the intricate details of their strategy. The girls, inexperienced in combat but driven by will and compassion, were ready. He didn't need them to fight, just to use their inherent abilities to execute the perfect plan. He wanted Crystal Spirit to use her magic to create a hot rainstorm over the goblins. At this crucial moment, Lucia understood the importance of their task, pleasing Shinji. He promised to treat her with utmost respect, yet jokingly called her a water boiler, which annoyed her, but she knew this wasn't the time to dwell on it. The goblins, scalded by the hot water, became chaotic, quickly regrouping to protect their leader. They suspected a human attack and doubled their caution. Everything was unfolding as Shinji had hoped, making the plan tremendously successful. Next was Lucia's turn. She began to observe and sniff out the goblins' scents, ignoring the common ones and focusing on the most unique. After a while, she finally identified the goblin leader. He wore a black leather cloak and looked towards Shinji. It seemed he had also figured out that Shinji was the one causing the disturbance, but for Shinji, he was still not sensitive enough. This leader blended in with the rest but was slightly larger in size. Then it was Erin's turn to show her talent. Before Shinji left, a worried Lucia ran to wish him luck. The Luna orphanage couldn't exist without him, so she prayed for his safe return. He reassured her not to worry, as the goblins had taught him how to activate and control his power. Erin would use her strength to get Shinji down to where the goblin leader stood. Shinji felt light as a feather and could easily jump to the goblin's location. But he heard Erin shout something in the strong wind, too quickly for him to see what she was saying. Believing she was cheering him on, he resolved not to lose this battle. The two girls, seeing Erin panting and trying to say something, rushed to inquire, only to find out Shinji had plunged into battle while still undressed. The soldiers inside the fortress still thought that it was because of them that the goblins had halted their advance. Now, they ignored Gran's instructions, eager to prove themselves. Miyamoto, wanting to show off, disregarded Gran's orders and advanced towards the goblins with his sword, seeking to prove himself as the country's greatest hero. At this moment, the goblin leader sensed something and carefully instructed his minions. It took them a while to understand, but by then, it was too late, and they were doomed. Thanks to Erin's whirlwind, rocks fell on the goblins, leaving none alive. Watching them die like ants infuriated the leader, who sought to reclaim his honor. Shinji then landed right in front of the goblin, unshaken and fearless. The goblin, thinking Shinji was surrendering, rambled on, causing Shinji a headache. Shinji suggested they quickly fight one-on-one, as all the lesser beings outside were already dead. Hearing this, the goblin, feeling his honor deeply wounded, decided to swing his axe down at Shinji. The powerful strike left the three girls trembling in fear for Shinji's safety. Surprisingly, Shinji blocked the attack with just one finger, shocking the goblin. Realizing it was no time for jokes, Shinji proceeded to unleash painful blows on the goblin. Seeing him lying on the ground gasping, Shinji felt somewhat satisfied. This was the punishment he deserved for messing with the Luna orphanage. Shinji had sworn no one would be at peace if they harmed his orphanage. As the goblin lay dying, he used his last bit of strength to utter a dark, mysterious spell. In the goblin's final words, Shinji noticed the mention of a master, indicating that this goblin might have been commanded by the final boss. After completing the ritual, the goblin breathed its last. Suddenly, the earth shook violently, throwing rocks everywhere, unsteadying Shinji. A giant, pitch-black scorpion with terrifyingly sharp horns emerged from the ground. This was the final boss Shinji had to face in this battle. Its menacing teeth made it look 100,000 times more terrifying. The goblin, seeing it, called out to the king but was unexpectedly devoured by the scorpion. It had become so wild that it no longer recognized its own kind. Shinji shouted, questioning if the scorpion had lost the pride of a king. The scorpion growled at Shinji, threatening that today would be his end, and then attacked. Its independently moving tentacles caught Shinji off guard. He had underestimated this part and nearly lost his life, realizing he should not underestimate his enemy. The scorpion backed Shinji into a corner with several more strikes, taking pleasure in its apparent victory. But ironically, it was killed by its own tentacles, which it couldn't control and started attacking each other, leaving it immobile. It seemed the Goblin King had been caught in a power struggle, leading to his demise. But Shinji, being the good person he was, decided to help it end its life more quickly and mercifully, rather than leaving it to die in hunger and decay. He drew his mithril sword, the first time he ever had to use it. Unsure of the sword's ability to withstand his power, he decided to finish it off with one strike. As the goblin regained consciousness, it asked who Shinji was. He replied that he was the master of the orphanage, prompting the goblin to scoff at the idea of being defeated by a mere caretaker. But for Shinji, being the master of the orphanage was precisely what made everything so easily victorious. He had to use the power of protection to save the children there, something the goblin could never understand. He called this the power of familial love. Shinji then delivered a decisive blow, ending the giant scorpion-shaped goblin. Meanwhile, Miyamoto boasted at the fortress, claiming to be the hero who protected the country with his treasured sword. Limited in power but boundless in delusion, he mistook a fat goblin, glowing with the aura of a main character, as the leader and charged at it. Shinji, watching this scene, shook his head in dismay and decided to return home. His mission was complete, and he didn't want to attract attention. His sole purpose was to protect the orphanage, and now that it was done, it was time to go back. A family of 4 happily returned home, and everything finally settled down. Today, the 4 of them decided to go to the market to buy some necessary items. Seeing potatoes on sale, Lucia wanted to buy extra. Thinking it over, Shinji felt it would be cheaper to grow them himself, so he decided to plant potato seeds. At the market, a crowd gathered to welcome the hero Sama. It turned out he was reaping the benefits of Shinji's defeat of the Goblin King, being credited for the country's newfound peace. Lucia, unable to hold back, started to reveal the truth, but before she could mention Shinji's name, he quickly pulled her away, not wanting her to stir up any trouble. Back in the forest, he expressed his disinterest in fame and superficial rewards, and to distract Lucia, he mentioned today's task. They needed to finish making a paper sample, confident that Eren would succeed. On their way home, they unexpectedly met the beautiful and wealthy daughter of the council leader Gran. She seemed to be there to invite Shinji to join the council again. Shinji's answer remained a firm no, advising her to return home and not interfere in his affairs. However, the Grand family wasn't ready to let a talent like Shinji live a simple life. For Shinji, life at the orphanage was already troublesome enough, and he didn't want to be involved in external matters. To his surprise, she revealed that the elders had observed his battle, praising his light and effortless combat skills, and his magical abilities that killed the monster in one strike. Even his mithril sword shattered into 100 pieces, indicating his immense strength. He had tried to hide his power but seemingly failed. She then grabbed Lucia, attempting to use her as a shield and a reason to persuade Shinji to join their side. Eventually, she left, defeated by Shinji's refusal, but with a notion that patience would eventually bring him to their side, promising to meet again. Annoyed by the encounter, Shinji and Lucia quickly returned home. At the market, they looked for paper types, while Eren at home had already created some, but they were failing in tearing. Finally, one type made from the wild grass in the garden proved to be durable and writable. So, they decided to publish a comic under the Luna Orphanage name the next day. This would be their second income source after the potato cake venture. It was the first time that such a luxury as a comic book became accessible to the common people there. Suddenly, they heard a loud explosion, caused by Oniai-chan's experiments. She excused herself, saying she needed to be indoors to enjoy tea and cakes, which angered everyone. But before they could dwell on it, they heard the sound of high heels approaching fast. A beautiful bespectacled girl arrived, calling out Shinji's name and announcing that he was under arrest. The girl entered loudly, calling for Shinji, but he immediately pointed out that she was trespassing. She still had some conscience, so she apologized and then began her business. She was Eustacia from the Child Protection Association. Shinji's calling her old witch hurt her pride deeply, making her extremely angry. Lucia, seeing the tension rise, stepped in between them to separate them. However, Shinji had no intention of physical confrontation, so there was no need for Lucia to interfere. If Eustacia stepped back, he would address her by her real name instead of Old Witch. She accused him of child abuse, suggesting that he might be jailed and the girls taken to another orphanage. Although not fully understanding the local laws, Shinji was sure he had done no such thing. But the accusation had come from a reliable informant and had even reached the royal palace, making it an unusual situation for such a small orphanage. However, clearing his name was the immediate concern. The girls spoke up, asserting that they had never been abused, even mentioning they couldn't sleep without him. The situation became more misunderstood as they explained, with Eren saying Shinji had taken her most precious dagger, so she couldn't sleep without him either. Oniai-chan talked about her dream children with Shinji, increasing Eustacia's suspicions. Shinji felt overwhelmed by the escalating situation, realizing the more he tried, the less he could do. Eustacia decided to stay and observe, assuring the girls they need not fear with her around. Shinji's face showed his utter dismay. Lucia quickly said she would prepare a room for Eustacia, earning praise for being a good girl. Shinji hadn't agreed to let her stay, but Eren argued that proving innocence sooner was better. Thinking it over, Shinji agreed to the arrangement, on the condition that Eustacia eats 3 meals a day on time and doesn't oversleep. This surprised her, but she agreed and went upstairs with Lucia. Unsure of the future, Shinji realized this was the situation he needed to adapt to and endure. The next morning, everyone gathered in the kitchen for a fun activity, trying a new dish. Eustacia was extremely skeptical about its drinkability, hesitant to try the steaming black liquid. Thankfully, Shinji's words reassured her enough to lessen her doubts and skepticism. The girls tried a sip and found it incredibly delicious. Shinji's cooking skills were not to be underestimated, but things took a turn when Eustacia tried a big sip of his concoction and immediately spat it out on Shinji's face. This drove Shinji almost crazy, not understanding why someone would taste a new drink in such a large gulp. Had she been more careful, it could have been corrected and tried gradually. Eustacia profusely apologized to a frustrated Shinji, who was being tenderly cleaned up by Oniai-chan. Unable to believe what was happening, he decided to leave in a huff. Later, everyone headed to the street to start their cafe venture. The Luna Cafe would be the first in the city to sell such a product, and Shinji had high hopes for his plan. The three girls changed into their adorable and beautiful waitress outfits. Erin was shy as she wasn't used to wearing such clothes, but Shinji's compliments made her happy to continue working. Oni-chan had modified her outfit to be more revealing, which infuriated Eustacia, questioning why she had to wear such clothes. Shinji suggested she could stay at the orphanage instead, as her presence might cause more chaos. But she insisted on staying to supervise Shinji, ensuring he didn't exploit the girls. The cafe was bustling with customers, eager to try the new drink. Some came for the cute maids, but overall, the cafe was a hit. Shinji explained that the drink was from a foreign, or rather, another world, piquing everyone's interest. However, noticing Eustacia's absence, Shinji went to look for her. She was cluelessly standing in a corner, too afraid to move. When he encouraged her to smile, she gave the most terrifying smile he had ever seen. She had no experience with such work, leaving Shinji at a loss. Eustacia approached a customer with a threatening tone, scaring him. Reporting back to Shinji that she had ordered coffee for the old man left him in shock. Why would she call a customer old man? He had to pull her aside to apologize. Surprisingly, the customer enjoyed her unique service style and looked forward to more of her yelling. Some customers came just to see Erin and Lucia, supporting the cafe generously. Suddenly, the two girls hugged Shinji, speaking unusually sweet words, frightening him. It turned out they were caffeine intoxicated and couldn't control their actions. Their talk of bathing together and wanting Shinji to stroke their ears while they slept shocked the customers, who began to suspect Shinji of taking advantage of the girls, including Eustacia. Shinji had to quickly close the cafe before the situation escalated and returned home. The first thing he did was ban the girls from drinking any more coffee. They couldn't remember what they had said, leading to a severe misunderstanding about Shinji. Shinji's situation seemed to be getting more complicated by the day. Today, Shii joined him in the bath, which took him by surprise. She had discovered a hot spring and eagerly anticipated some praise from him. Since Shinji isn't very expressive, he decided to pat her head, eliciting a loud, joyful reaction from Shii. She even exaggeratedly claimed that she would never wash her hair again, leaving Shinji speechless. Meanwhile, the other girls entered one by one to change for the bath, causing Eustacia to become suspicious. She questioned if Shinji really bathed with them. Shinji clarified that he was merely helping them clean up. Eustacia, doubtful of his explanation, argued with him. Unable to convince her, Shinji invited her to join them in the bath to understand the situation better. While changing clothes, the girls were shocked by Shii's figure and curiously disgusted. When they emerged, they found Shinji already relaxing in the warm water, until their chatter disturbed his peace. Curious about their discussion topic, Lucia excitedly revealed it was about bust sizes. Erin, intrigued, asked Shinji about his preference in this regard. Everyone assumed he preferred larger sizes, sparking doubts in Eustacia. She tried to find a culprit, even accusing Shinji of being responsible for Shii's figure. She suggested that understanding bust sizes was important for childcare. Shinji, feeling wronged, tried to explain, but Eustacia didn't believe him and insisted on bathing him herself. This was getting out of hand, so Shinji firmly rejected the absurd idea. Eustacia, interpreting his refusal as fear of losing, insisted on a ridiculous competition. They sat down to a bathing contest, where if Shinji won, he would have full authority over the girls. If Eustacia won, he would have to admit to mistreating them. Provoked by her challenge, but still maintaining his composure, Shinji reluctantly agreed to this nonsensical battle. Thus, a contest to determine who was better at bathing commenced between Shinji and Eustacia. Unable to wait any longer, the two began a truly intense battle. Shinji targeted her head with soap, catching her off guard and forcing her into a defensive position. It might not have been the fairest move, but the battle continued regardless. Even though she resisted having her head touched, she didn't realize that this would be her downfall. Shinji commented that her hair was weak and needed care. Eustacia still believed she took good care of her hair, wondering how it could be. Indeed, hair can be severely damaged by prolonged exposure to sunlight and high temperatures. She recalled spending long hours in her office but also had to go outside at times. The heat had caused her hair to become dry and brittle. Still, being a woman, she was very concerned about her appearance. He suggested she go to the locker room to get some hair oil. Eustacia, focused on the battle, quickly stood up to go to the changing room, not forgetting to turn back and thank him, her benefactor. She couldn't find it and called out to Shinji, who seemed indifferent and gave a vague reply. But when she came out with a scowl, she realized she had been tricked. This also meant her defeat as she left the soaking pool, leaving Shinji extremely satisfied. Looking at his face, Eustacia conceded defeat, implying he could now pursue the young girls. Eustacia knew how to hit psychologically, making it hard for anyone to claim victory. Lucia swam over, thinking he wanted to touch somewhere, shocking Shinji as he had never entertained such thoughts. Meanwhile, Eren looked suspicious because Shii had touched her bottom without permission, which Shii denied. Eren insisted it must have been her if not Shii. All eyes turned to Shinji, but he was innocent of such lewd acts. Eustacia joyfully grabbed a rope, seeing it as the perfect moment to capture him, sending Shinji into a panic. As the accusations of inappropriate touching continued, the inspector could no longer stand it and moved to arrest him. Suddenly, a loud noise came from beneath the water as a gigantic octopus emerged, grabbing the girls, leaving Shinji bewildered. Finally, Eustacia drew her sword for a decisive battle with the creature. The octopus fell, defeated, but the inspector was stained black by its ink. The question remained, where did this octopus come from? Was it there all along, or had someone let it in? Finally, the second king of octopuses became a wonderful meal for the orphanage. Surprisingly, octopus could be turned into such a delicious dish. The inspector, still suspicious, declared that tonight he should not sleep with the children. Minors who are not yet married should not sleep with men, so tonight she would sleep with Eri and Lucia. Then, Shii volunteered to sleep with Shinji, ostensibly to keep him company. Shinji bluntly said it didn't matter, as he would let Shii sleep outside the door while he stayed in bed. But that night turned out to be a long one, something Eustacia could not have anticipated. Holding Lucia in her sleep was one thing, but with Eren, it wasn't that easy. Eren, unable to find her dagger, became furious, not wanting anyone to touch her. Moreover, in her dream, she didn't recognize Eustacia and almost did something regrettable. Eustacia, overwhelmed, didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Shinji had anticipated everything and had been standing outside her room. Only with his reassurance could the two girls settle back into sleep. Eustacia realized her mistake and could only apologize to Shinji. She regretted her actions, having misunderstood and unintentionally hurt him, and was sorry for trying to take him away. Moreover, Eustacia did not hesitate to kneel and bow in apology, leaving Shinji in an awkward situation. He quickly ended the matter, and everyone returned to their rooms to continue sleeping. Tomorrow will be a long day, so don't waste time on such pointless matters, he thought. Unexpectedly, Shinji's bed ended up accommodating 5 people. Eustacia lay there to ensure he didn't do anything improper. Shii felt it was unfair that everyone else was in bed while she had to sleep alone. So, they all ended up sleeping together without further discussion. That night, Lucia couldn't sleep and stirred, waking Shinji. She felt happy lying beside him and Eustacia, like being between a father and mother. Even though her parents couldn't return, she was now happy with Shinji taking care of her. Having him in her life felt like having new hope. Hearing this, Eustacia knew she had to trust Shinji at least once. For Shinji, becoming the head of an orphanage and caring for others was unimaginable before. Yet, he would always do his best. The next morning, everyone woke up to find Eustacia had returned to headquarters early. While still figuring out what to do with the remaining octopus, they saw her return. But in her hand was a new warrant for a crime related to a royal coup. The situation became so serious that a trial was organized to judge Shinji on this matter. He knew Eustacia wasn't fond of him, but it was unnecessary to go to such ridiculous lengths. Moreover, as she said, there was no clear evidence, yet the trial was set to convict him. It felt like a medieval ordeal, which he was still struggling to adapt to, despite having some idea about it. To his surprise, Shinji's lawyers turned out to be the three girls, using gentle reasoning to counter Eustachia's forceful arguments in court. Realizing this, he thought it might be better not to have any lawyers at all. Today's witness was Sylvie, the daughter of the head of the Explorers Guild. Shinji just learned how cunning she was, exploiting weaker people for her own benefit. Initially, he thought she was just an ordinary noble, but she turned out to be quite terrifying. She accused him of defeating the goblin boss but hiding his true strength and refusing to join her father's Explorers Guild, hence her grudge. But his blunt demeanor and strength had left an impression on Sylvie. Knowing the first witness wasn't serious, the court moved on to the second witness. It was Lucia, who praised Shinji for cooking soup for her every morning. However, this didn't help the investigation, so they called the next person. A guy named Eric stepped in, claiming to be the head of Aaron's fan club. He came to take Aaron away, hearing that Shinji had been convicted, thinking Aaron might now belong to him. Eric's obvious infatuation with her explained his presence in court as a witness. If he slandered Shinji, it would likely be about Shinji handling 10 thugs single-handedly as a form of punishment. While true, Shinji's extraordinary strength was suspicious. Eric also wanted to use this opportunity to challenge Shinji to a duel to prove his strength to Aaron, who was watching. The judge banged the gavel to stop this pointless argument and continue with the proceedings. The third witness, a woman from the brothel, spoke up next. The top courtesan, seeking revenge for the incident at the orphanage, had her own reasons for being there. Shinji scoffed, knowing her intentions, and was ready to counter her absurd arguments. It turned out that in the end, Eustachia's goal was simply to find a way to charge him with something. Seeing the trial drag on, one girl became enraged and suddenly demanded his immediate execution. The mysterious girl incessantly demanded execution, putting pressure on the judge, who appeared worried. It was only when Eustachia spoke that they realized this girl was Prime Minister Mortissimo, a well-known but unseen figure. She didn't care about the lack of evidence and only wanted to convict and execute Shinji quickly. Eustachia wanted to defend him but felt powerless. For Mortissimo, treating those around her as insignificant was routine. To condemn someone innocent without evidence is itself a crime of false accusation. This made Aaron and Shii furious, wanting to claw at her face, but they were helpless. Shinji's indifference to not introducing himself and his curiosity about her name made him stand out and stirred a sense of compassion in Mortissimo. However, this order came from the king himself, so she had no choice but to proceed against Shinji. Shinji's only question was who this king was and why he wanted to eliminate him so badly. Mortissimo unleashed powerful attacks, but Shinji effortlessly blocked them. This shocked her as Shinji was much stronger than expected. She now understood why the king wanted him gone. No one in the kingdom should possess such formidable power. Shinji possessed the power of the origin skill from legends. The Grim Reaper could understand the source of his strength to protect his children. The origin skill was simply initial ideas from the children, which were crucial for Shinji. Shinji denied this because he only cared for the children out of obligation. If the battle continued this way, Mortissimo would neither win nor lose, as Shinji already possessed an extraordinary natural strength. Therefore, to achieve her goal, she decided to first eradicate Shinji's powers. But how she planned to do this remained a mystery to Shinji, leaving him to ponder Mortissimo's intentions. She looked at Shinji and quickly left, leaving behind a mysterious glance. This story was far from over, and Shinji would not yet be at peace with this formidable force. Returning to the orphanage, Shinji resumed his normal fatherly duties. He cared for Lucia, stroking her head to help her recover her normal health. For Lucia, being caressed by him was an incredibly wonderful and miraculous thing for her health. Aaron and Shii, who had been weeding the garden, watched this scene with envy. Aaron wanted Shinji to stroke her ears, while Shii longed for cuddles and hugs. Shinji found this quite troublesome and reminded them of how they enjoyed the high-quality meat sent by Eustacia, still drooling at the thought of the deliciously grilled meat and sauce. Shinji wondered if Eren and Shii eating meat violated any divine regulations. For Eren, a goddess, not eating meat offered by the people would be considered ungrateful. And Shii, being a water spirit, wasn't bound by any strict rules. Shii even complained to Shinji about why inviting other spirits to barbecue always ended up in them being angry, a mild reaction compared to what Shii had done. Suddenly, Eustacia returned, making Eren think she wanted some of that meat. But Eustacia said she had found a foster home for the 3 children and Shinji could go there with her. This was a serious matter, so they hid behind a wall to discuss it. The girls tracked Shinji down and temporarily paralyzed his right hand with magic. Clearly, they didn't want to go to any other family but wanted to live with Shinji only. Thinking of their memories and time together, none wanted to leave. Eustacia thought she had made a mistake and said they could return if Shinji wanted. But he decided to find a new family for the girls. After all, he couldn't provide the best care for them, having been abandoned himself as a child. Finding a happier and better place would be the best for the girls. He cared for them but didn't think he was fit to play the role of a father. From the beginning, taking over the orphanage and running it had been puzzling for Shinji. He decided to stand up and take the girls to their new, happier, and safer place. Shii used her power to paralyze his other hand and splashed water in his eyes, causing him pain and making him fall. Yet, he still managed to stand up and take them without much difficulty. Lucia, realizing she couldn't do anything, burst into tears, begging Shinji not to abandon her. Her words, abandonment, deeply touched Shinji's heart, reminding him of his own past when he was abandoned by his mother. He understood her feelings all too well. Agreeing to a compromise, he decided to slightly alter his decision. The girls could stay at the foster home for a week, and if they didn't like it, they could return to the orphanage, where he would welcome them back. The girls, having been homeless for a year, felt a week was nothing significant. They promised to return in exactly a week. Before leaving, they asked Eustacia to convey their agreement to the foster family. Shinji returned to the orphanage alone to prepare dinner. However, being alone was a difficult adjustment for him. Cooking was challenging without Lucia's help to watch the fire and season the food. Preparing the bath was hard without Shii's ability to summon rain and wind. The thought of the overgrown grass in the garden was the least of his worries. Yet, it was good to have some quiet time he always longed for. But sitting alone at the dinner table, looking at the empty chairs, he felt a pang of loneliness. The food was still basic, and he wondered what to cook for their growth. However, reducing the food portions helped cut down costs. A week passed, and Eustacia returned to report the outcome. All the girls wanted to stay with their foster parents, asking Shinji to limit contact. It was painful for him to hear, but if there was an emergency, he could write a letter, and Eustacia would deliver it. After she left, Shinji became completely motionless, heartbroken but understanding why the children chose that way. The foster home had delicious food and cozy, beautiful bedding, so why would they choose to return? He considered this his achievement with the orphanage and felt his mission was complete. He planned to report this to the king and close the Luna orphanage, returning to his rightful place. Shinji decided to keep himself busy with tasks during his free time without the girls. He went to the forest to hunt monsters and unexpectedly encountered Sylvie and Arnon there. Sylvie couldn't stop looking at Shinji with an intense desire, as if she wanted to devour him. Despite their significant backgrounds and wealth, these 2 girls kept following Shinji relentlessly. Shinji felt weakened after recent events, struggling even with a small flame. The girls tried scouting for monsters, but finding none, decided to continue accompanying him. Sylvie is the daughter of the Riskus family, who manage one of the largest explorer guilds in the region. Arnon comes from the Kimbergs, a renowned lending family. Shinji, just wanting a normal life, tried his best to avoid them. Their persistence annoyed him, and he unapologetically sent them away. But they were not ones to give up easily. Sylvie was fascinated by his strength in defeating a goblin, and Arnon was indebted to him for a life-saving potion. Arnon insisted on marrying Shinji, threatening to end her life right there if he refused. However, the potion was meant for men, raising questions about its effect on Arnon. Arnon then revealed that she used to be a boy but had transformed into a girl due to an incident. If Shinji continued to reject her, she would be heartbroken and lose her will to live. Shinji remembered meeting her as a young girl willing to offer him everything she had. It would be surprising if he rejected her, perhaps even better if he chose to keep her confined. Arnon was confident enough to express these unusual preferences to Shinji. Sylvie, standing aside, felt jealous of Arnon's openness with Shinji. Realizing this conversation was no longer appropriate for him, Shinji decided to leave, abandoning the two there. But not long after, he was ambushed by a thrown dagger flying straight towards him. Was this the monster scouting the girls mentioned, or did they fail to warn him because it wasn't a monster? Shinji's current strength was a mere fraction of what it once was, making such situations dangerous. Sylvie had intentionally not warned him, hoping to fight alongside him. She saw this as an opportunity to impress him and offer her assistance. A large, menacing man stood there, his face full of murderous intent. In this crucial moment, the task at hand was to fight back against him together. The men in front of them were intimidating, but Arnon seemed unbothered and nonchalant, brandishing her weapon and even threatening them, causing Shinji a moment of alarm. The men spoke of using Shinji as a sacrifice for the mud god, triggering a memory in him. Isekai had once mentioned the mud god to him, and though he didn't know the details, he had some understanding. Sylvie turned to Shinji, asking what to do next, with the only option being to fight as usual. Shinji, refusing to be humiliated or underestimated, decided to make them fear him. A few sword swings were enough to make them retreat, showing fear. In the past, these moves might have been lethal, but now Shinji was too weak. Sylvie was cornered to the edge of a cliff, and the men suggested she could be spared if she agreed to become their woman. Disgusted by their foul mouths, Sylvie retorted, asking them to shut up. Her defiance infuriated the ruffians, who thought she was only brave because of Shinji's protection. They decided to attack, but before they could reach Sylvie, they suddenly found themselves unable to move. Unbeknownst to them, Sylvie had hit their pressure points, rendering them motionless. Every person has pressure points that can block the flow of magical energy if hit. Now immobilized, Sylvie had more time to chat with them. She didn't use a knife in combat, as she found it distasteful. The men, once they awoke, would probably find themselves in a cave behind them. Shinji, hearing their screams, went to check on them and was surprised to see Sylvie had managed without a knife. Sylvie kept this ability hidden to protect herself and didn't reveal it to Shinji. He understood her reasons and didn't blame her for deceiving him. Meanwhile, Arnon was handling the situation on her own, and her resilience caught Shinji's attention. Instead of standing behind Sylvie and fighting alongside her, Shinji decided to take on the enemies on his own using his unique techniques. He couldn't just watch as she struggled, so he intervened to help her. Arnon was delighted to be protected by him, even though she was capable of handling it herself. Her unique ability was corrosion, capable of inflicting severe damage. The men boastfully declared they would quickly dispose of Shinji and then deal with the two women. Arnon's skill, November Erosion, allowed her to corrode the air itself, earning her the nickname, Princess of Death, in the Explorers Guild. The men suddenly felt a strange sensation and became extremely fatigued, moving sluggishly like zombies. Attacking their pressure points was futile as they were being manipulated by magic. They formed a square, and Sylvie decided to use her January power. Watching the girls struggle infuriated Shinji, prompting him to stand up and fight himself. With just one swing of his sword, he defeated all the enemies. Arnon angrily questioned why Shinji didn't use his full strength from the beginning. Shinji replied that he didn't think it necessary to use his most powerful trump card. He restrained himself because using 100% of his power could have collapsed the cave. Shinji grabbed one of the awakened men, revealing he had been controlled by a lord, and could meet her by going down a nearby black hole. She was known as the Dark Goddess, a cold-blooded figure. Realizing the complexity of the situation, Shinji decided to be more cautious in his future actions. The girls were puzzled by Shinji's decision to return when they were about to meet the boss. He explained that they were just there to collect mushrooms and slime, prioritizing his safety. The man then revealed that the Lord was fond of luxuries like jewels and gold, and would eagerly pursue them. Suddenly, a voice asked who was calling for her. In front of them now stood Shii Wani-chan, familiarly known as the Fallen Angel. The sudden appearance of Shii as the Fallen Angel was a shocking turn of events for Shinji. In confusion, he reacted by delivering a powerful punch to Shii, knocking her to the ground, causing a dent in the earth. Realizing whom he had struck, Shinji wondered why she was there instead of with her foster parents and why she was leading a gang of thieves. Shii attempted to explain, but Shinji, knowing her tendency for long stories, quickly dismissed her. It was only when she mentioned that Lucia and Eren might be in danger that Shinji paid attention. It wasn't a case of psychological manipulation or Shii actually leading the thieves, it was more complex. Shii rambled about needing to turn dark to become the person Shinji would love, but she didn't understand what real love was or what Shinji truly wanted in a woman. She was self-absorbed, overestimating what she called her divine power. Shinji stopped listening, suspecting someone else was controlling Shii. He quickly retrieved his mithril sword and threw it at her, hoping to snap her back to reality for a proper conversation. However, blinded by her love, Shii only wanted to live with him forever, either in the cave or at the orphanage. Being an orphan herself, she saw no issue with this arrangement. Shinji realized the only way to save Shii was through a battle of equals. He challenged her to use her divine power against him, with the promise to help her return to her normal self and to save Lucia and Eren. If he won, he would make all the decisions, and she couldn't force him to love her. If she won, the implications were clear: Shinji would belong to Shii. She was determined, as winning Shinji was her ultimate goal. She prepared herself, refusing to lose in this eagerly anticipated battle. Shii's sudden confrontation with Shinji, despite being a representative of life and known as Mother, was truly startling. Shii claimed to be one of the main pillars of the world, possessing immense power. Following her statement, she summoned a massive flood by controlling the rain and wind. Shinji, not understanding the purpose of the battle, saw no meaning in it. Shii was determined not to hold back, forcing Shinji to respond with equal force. She called upon water tendrils and lamenting streams to gather and fight alongside her. Shinji was disheartened, wondering why she hadn't used this power against the goblin and only now. He loudly warned the two girls behind him not to let the water touch them, as it could bring misfortune. The girls believed they couldn't die without having been loved by Shinji. Contact with the water would infect them with a mythical effect known as Death's Touch. The onlookers, realizing the danger, quickly fled. Now surrounded by water, the trio was in a difficult situation. Shinji knew that attacking Shii while she was summoning spirits would prevent her from recovering. Remembering her dangerous experiments and rapid recovery at the orphanage, he understood that while summoning, Shii was in a state between life and death, making her vulnerable. Sylvie and Arnon decided to use their 1,000-year protective charms to combat the lethal water. Shinji focused on Shii, who then summoned a freezing rain, turning the world into ice. Shinji, protected by Sylvie's charm, easily stood up after the icy assault. Shii, claiming she would recover quickly, collapsed exhausted. Shinji, who had been behind her, broke a jar over her head. This act helped Shii return to normal, signifying the end of the battle. Shii, tightly bound by Shinji with ropes, was handed over to Sylvie for handling. The blows she received were painful but helped Shii come to her senses. Crying out in pain, Shii seemed to have lost her memory, so Shinji reluctantly released her. Shii then revealed that upon arriving at her foster parents' house, she discovered they were involved in a sacrificial ritual. They were collecting unnoticed orphans for sacrifices to demonic deities. Eustacia had been psychologically manipulated into believing there was a better orphanage, which led to her actions. Realizing Lucia and Eren might be in danger, they hurried to rescue them. The demonic deities had battled with the god Ultai Sama and were sealed in another dimension. The world would face destruction if 1,000 souls were sacrificed to them. The recent weakening of the seal and the summoning of heroes were part of this scheme, signaling the impending return of the demon god Lukui. Essentially, the villains needed many children to summon the demon. They were likely followers of Ultai Sama, the only one knowledgeable about the sacrificial ritual. However, discussing this wouldn't solve the immediate problem. They needed to quickly rescue Lucia and Eren. If the fools in Walsum continued summoning heroes, it would facilitate the demon god's return, putting the world in grave danger. Now aware of the situation, they needed to find the mastermind behind it all. Surprisingly, they found Shia naked and rambling about finding the person responsible. The Prime Minister of Walsum, Mortissimo, was revealed as the planner and orchestrator of these events. She had aided the Grim Reaper in claiming the lives of 5 million people. Meanwhile, Miyamoto bragged about his feats, including easily wielding a sacred sword that no one else could lift. While he was still boasting, a servant rushed in with news of an intrusion at the castle. Miyamoto quickly mounted his horse to quell the disturbance. This would be the second time Miyamoto appeared before Shinji, ready to confront him. Shinji's group boldly stormed into the castle through the front entrance without hesitation. Although it was somewhat uncharacteristic of Shinji, the circumstances demanded such action. The soldiers inside were easily defeated and surrendered to Shinji's formidable attacks. Shia, still upset because the other 2 girls seemed to understand Shinji better, added to the noise and chaos. During this, Miyamoto swung at Shinji, but he dodged, infuriating Miyamoto. Shinji's old classmates also arrived, surprised to see him. It made sense, given how they used to bully him. Shinji had even considered ending his life due to their relentless torment. But something seemed off. It appeared that the soldiers had already been killed, possibly by Mortissimo, who had the power to control death. However, Miyamoto seemed immune to this control, likely due to his strong magic resistance. His arrogance was evident upon seeing people recognize his ability with the sacred sword. He demanded an apology from Shinji, threatening consequences otherwise. However, Miyamoto seemed easily distracted by women, as his attention shifted to Shii's body, boldly stating he wouldn't mind making her his lover. Infuriated by his gaze, Shii declared her love only for Shinji, rejecting Miyamoto's advances. Despite Shinji's embarrassment and the girls' insistence on their love for him, Miyamoto was left seething with anger. Challenged by this rejection, he decided to engage in a life-or-death battle with Shinji to prove who was superior. As Miyamoto swung his sword with force, Shinji effortlessly blocked it with just 2 fingers, causing Miyamoto to fall to the ground, unable to get up. The sight of Shinji wielding the sacred sword with such ease and power left Miyamoto shocked and scared, as he had always believed only he could control the sacred sword. Refusing to accept this reality, Miyamoto loudly demanded his sword back.